So today there's a focus on this really tragic character, really the most tragic person in the whole Bible, Judas. Someone who is invited to walk with Jesus for 3 years, and who Jesus himself entrusted as well all of the finances of their band of apostles. He was the one that would then take the money and give it to those in need or to buy food for them. And yet we hear about, yesterday actually, we heard of the story of Mary of Bethany. And remember, she had that wonderful fragrant smell. And actually, it was a couple days ago. And Judas gets mad that this costly perfume is poured out on Jesus' feet. And he says, this should have been given to the poor. It cost almost a whole year's wages of someone working an entire year. And yet, St. John reminds us in that same passage that he said this not because he cared about the poor, but that he used to steal from the money bag, little by little, drip by drip by drip. And that's important for us to see that the battle for Judas's heart, he lost that battle well before this moment of betraying Jesus. It started with something that probably might have seemed just little, insignificant. He had this opportunity, and he just took a couple coins. And he looked around and saw he didn't get caught. Going to take a couple more coins. Look around. Wow, I'm not getting caught. I'm going to take a little more and a little more. And you know, he actually did get caught, but not in the way that we would think. Because when you start reaching for something and taking something, little by little, you start to get trapped by it. You start to say, well, if I can get away with it, I could do something more and more and more. And as he was doing that, he was building a wall around himself. He was building his own prison without even realizing it, thinking that he was free, that he was getting away. And yet he was actually building his own jail cell. A great thing to think about is, what's that little temptation in your life? That little drip. Maybe you've had that experience of recognizing when the teacher's not there. I can look at my friend's test, get the answers. And maybe you've never been caught. And you might say, well, I could keep doing that and keep doing that. And maybe it's something that you're noticing it gets harder and harder and harder to say no to that, because you're able to get a lot of great things. You're able to be able to not have to worry about studying, be able to just get the stuff that you need, and little by little you start training your mind and your heart for something that sooner or later it's going to all come out. It's the same thing with lying. Have you ever had that moment where you've said a little lie and you got away with it? And then you keep doing it more and more, and all of a sudden those lies start to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And you pride yourself with how clever you are, and yet you're building again a jail right around you. It can be a lot of other different things. But the story of Judas, it's a warning for us. Judas's heart started to begin that betrayal when he started to take that first little bit of coins and realized he could get away with it. But always remember that even though we might get away with it with our teachers, with our parents, be able to do all sorts of things, remember, who's always watching? The Lord, right? And he looks not in meanness, but he looks with sadness, saying he sees the jail that's being built around you. If you keep thinking, I'm getting away with it, I'm getting away with it, nobody's calling me out on it. But the Lord looks and he says, please, don't keep going after that. Don't keep going after it before it's too late. Before all of a sudden that jail gets complete and the door closes. A great thing to think about. This is something that's helped me sometimes when I find myself being drawn towards something that I know is going to build a jail around me. I always have to stop and say, the Lord is always watching. And I remember actually being in a play, in a skit that I used to do with youth group. And it was the story of this young man, and his friends were coming over, and they were saying, hey, let's do all these things. Let's drink this stuff that's not good for us. Let's say these things that's not good for us. Let's watch these things that's not good for us. Let's do all these different things that are not good for us. And Jesus was actually there in his living room because Jesus came over first. And they were going to have great Jesus time together. He was so excited about that. And then the knock comes on the door, and Jesus is there, and the guy is kind of like, hold on one second, Jesus, let me find out who's here. So he goes over, he opens the door, and it's all of these people that are saying, why don't you hang out with us? And he's kind of like this, and Jesus actually comes over and puts his arm on his shoulder, or his hand on his shoulder. And the person is kind of like, Jesus, why don't you just go sit on the couch here? And, here's, you can watch EWTN or something like that, and you just kind of sit over here. I'm going to hang out over here, and you really wouldn't want to hang out with these guys. And then he goes towards them, and Jesus just silently walks, and he puts his hand right on them. And they do this back and forth. And then the people outside are saying, all these different things are going to be going on. And he's wrestling, and finally he gets mad at Jesus because he doesn't like the fact that Jesus is always there with his arm on his shoulder. And so guess what Jesus does? Or guess what this person does? He goes over, he takes Jesus, he throws him across the room, and he says, I don't want you to follow me. I want you to stay right here. And actually crucifies him right in his living room. And Jesus stays there. And he goes like this, and he goes off. But then he comes back, and he's not feeling well. He's drunken stuff that's not really good for him. And so he's kind of waddling in. And then he looks at Jesus, who's dead in his living room on the cross, and he realizes what he did. He falls on the ground and starts to weep. And then Jesus on the cross comes down and lifts him up. That's sadly what Judas wasn't willing to do. Judas kept his eyes closed. We know about this story that even when he recognized that he crucified the Lord, that he betrayed him, he said, God can't forgive me. But God was ready to forgive him. But Judas had built this jail cell for himself, but it was one saying, I don't have hope. And just like I mentioned yesterday, the one thing that you should always remember is no matter what happens in life, Jesus always pours his mercy. You can always run to him, just like Peter did. Just like the rain that's outside, it's always being poured out. And you can always come under that mercy. So let's learn from Peter's example, who also fell. And let's learn the warning of Judas, that we have to be careful. What are we reaching for? And always remembering, when you ever feel like you're able to get away with something, remember that Jesus has his hand right on your shoulder, saying, I'm right here, and I can help you say no to this thing. Don't let it build a prison around you, but come to my mercy.